My wife's millionaire family called me a ghost at their Halloween party after bankrupting me. You know that smell? Fresh earth mixed with diesel fuel and morning coffee from a beat-up thermos. For 25 years, that was the smell of success to me. That was the smell of building something real with your own two hands. Funny how a smell can turn from comfort to poison once everything falls apart. My name's Frank. I'm 52 years old, and I used to own a construction company called Frank's Foundations. Used to. Those two words carry more weight than any beam I ever lifted. Let me take you back to when things were good, when I still believed that hard work and a firm handshake meant something in this world. I met Sarah at a charity auction 27 years ago. I was there because my buddy dragged me along, said I needed to get out more. She was there because her daddy practically owned the venue, Harold Montgomery. That name probably doesn't mean much to you, but in the Dallas suburbs, it meant everything. The man built skyscrapers the way most people build Lego towers, except he looked down from them with the same contempt. Sarah was different, or so I thought. She laughed at my jokes. She didn't mind that I showed up in my best shirt that still had a small cement stain on the collar I'd missed. When I nervously told her my hands smelled like concrete instead of money, she grabbed them and said that's exactly what she loved about them. Real hands. Working hands. Her family looked at those same hands like I was holding something obscene. Every Sunday dinner at the Montgomery estate felt like a performance review I was failing. Harold would pat me on the shoulder in front of his millionaire buddies and make jokes about having a real working man in the family, like I was some kind of exotic pet. A trained bear that could occasionally fix a leaky faucet. But I didn't care. I had Sarah, and I had my business. Frank's Foundations wasn't some corporate giant. We weren't building stadiums or shopping malls. We did residential and small commercial work in the northern Dallas suburbs. Solid work. The kind where you stake your reputation on every footer you pour. My company was worth about $5 million, and I'd built every cent of that value, without a single penny from the Montgomerys. That fact drove Harold crazier than my old Ford F-250 parked next to his Bentley at family gatherings. I had a crew of 15 guys. Good men who showed up on time and did the job right. My right hand was Mike. I'd hired him when he was 18 years old, fresh out of high school with more energy than sense. Taught him everything. How to read soil reports, how to calculate load-bearing requirements, how to talk to inspectors without sounding like you're trying to hide something. 10 years later, he was the best foundation specialist in the county. I trusted him with my business, with my life. He was like a son to me. That sentence hurts more now than it did to write my company's bankruptcy filing. The thing about building foundations is that you learn to spot cracks early. A tiny fissure in concrete today becomes a canyon tomorrow. I should have seen the cracks forming in my own life. Should have noticed the way Sarah started spending more time at her parents' place. The way Harold's smiles got wider whenever he asked about my business. The way Mike started avoiding eye contact during morning briefings. The first crack showed up when I lost a bid on the biggest project of my career, the new Riverside Commercial Complex. 15 buildings, 3 years of steady work. I'd spent weeks on that proposal, stayed up nights making sure every number was perfect. My bid was competitive. My track record was spotless. I lost to a guy named Rogers. Danny Rogers. Slick hair, expensive suits, and a construction company that built like cement was their mortal enemy. I'd seen Rogers work. Cutting corners wasn't his strategy. It was his religion. But somehow, he undercut my bid by 30%. That hurt. But you take your losses in this business. You shake it off and move on to the next job. Then Mike walked into my office on a Tuesday morning. October, about a week after I lost the bid. He wouldn't look at me, just stared at his boots and mumbled that he was putting in his notice. Said Rogers made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Better pay, better benefits, a chance to be a partner eventually. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Just this hollow feeling, like someone had scooped out my insides with a backhoe. Then he told me 3 of my best equipment operators were going with him. That's when I got angry. I asked him if this was planned. if he'd been talking to Rogers before the bid. Mike finally looked up at me, and I saw shame in his eyes, but he didn't deny it. He just said business is business, and he had a family to think about. Then he walked out of my office, and I sat there feeling like someone had just ripped a load-bearing wall out of my house. You ever notice how betrayals come in waves? Like the universe decides you haven't learned your lesson yet. So it hits you again, harder. 2 weeks before Halloween, Sarah told me she was tired. Not physically tired. Tired of playing the part of a working man's wife. Those were her exact words. Playing the part. Like our 25-year marriage was some kind of community theater production she'd finally gotten bored with. I came home early that day. Had to pick up some documents I'd forgotten. Found her at the gate of our house with 2 designer suitcases. A Mercedes was idling in the driveway. Not our Mercedes. We drove practical cars. This one was silver, pristine, and cost more than most people's houses. Rogers was behind the wheel, smiling like he'd just won another bid. Sarah didn't even have the decency to look surprised. She just sighed like I'd interrupted something inconvenient. Told me she'd have her lawyer contact mine. Said something about how she'd wasted enough years pretending to be satisfied with a middle-class life when she was meant for more. I stood there watching my wife throw her bags into another man's car. Watched Rogers give me this little smirk through the windshield. A smirk that said he'd won more than just a construction project. That's when everything clicked. The lost bid, Mike leaving, the timing of it all. This wasn't coincidence. This was coordinated. They hadn't just stolen my best workers and my biggest contract. They'd built their future on the rubble of my marriage. I wish I could tell you that was rock bottom, that the story ends there with me picking up the pieces and moving on. But life doesn't work that way. When you're going down, gravity makes sure you hit every branch on the way. Every year on Halloween, the Montgomerys do their famous masquerade ball. It was the event in Dallas high society. Politicians, business moguls, old money families. They all came out in their elaborate costumes and masks that cost more than my monthly mortgage. Sarah lived for that party. Spent months planning her costume, making sure she'd be the most photographed person there. I always hated it. Felt like a museum exhibit. Look, a real working man. Watch him try to use the correct fork. Harold loved parading me around his friends, showing off his salt-of-the-earth son-in-law. Made him seem relatable, I guess. Like he understood regular people because his daughter had married one. This year, obviously, I was invited. Sarah had moved out 3 weeks earlier, and the divorce papers were sitting on my kitchen counter like a coiled snake. But Harold hadn't forgotten about me. Oh no, Harold had been waiting for this moment for years. See, way back when I was just starting out, I needed a loan for my first excavator. Banks weren't exactly lining up to give money to a 27-year-old veteran with a dream and a pickup truck. Harold offered to help, not with cash. God forbid. He co-signed the loan, guaranteed it. At the time, I thought it was the first genuinely kind thing my father-in-law had ever done for me. I paid that loan off in 3 years. Never missed a payment. Forgot all about Harold's involvement. Harold's lawyers didn't forget. One lost bid shouldn't tank a $5 million company. I had other projects lined up, other clients. But Harold's legal team went to my bank with documentation showing that my company's financial guarantor, Harold Montgomery, had concerns about Frank's foundation's stability. They pointed to the lost Riverside bid, to Mike and 3 operators leaving, to Sarah's divorce filing, which painted me as unstable. The bank panicked, sent me a letter, very professional, very polite, very clear. Pay off all outstanding credit lines by end of quarter or face foreclosure on all business assets. I had 60 days to come up with $800,000. I tried everything, talked to other banks, called in favors, reached out to former clients. Everyone was sympathetic. Nobody was writing checks. Funny how fast you become toxic when the word gets out that Montgomery Financial has concerns about your stability. I started selling equipment. The new excavator I just bought, 3 skid steers. Even sold my personal truck and started driving a 15-year-old Honda that burned oil. Every penny went to the bank. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Meanwhile, the Halloween ball happened. I wasn't there, obviously, but Johnny Ramirez was. Johnny had worked for me for 12 years before the exodus to Rogers' company. Good guy. Felt guilty about leaving. He texted me at 11:47 p.m. that night. The text said, "Boss, I'm sorry. You need to know." Then he sent me a video. Someone had recorded Harold Montgomery's toast. The old man stood there in some kind of elaborate Victorian costume, champagne glass rays, surrounded by Dallas's elite, everyone in masks and finery. The video quality was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. Harold thanked everyone for coming, talked about family and tradition. Then he raised his glass toward Sarah and Rogers, who were standing together in matching costumes. A king and queen. How original. Harold said he was thrilled to celebrate new beginnings, that Sarah had finally found a partner who could provide the foundation she deserved. A strong foundation. A proper foundation. He paused for effect, and the crowd leaned in. Then he said, "And I'm pleased to say we finally cleared away the ghosts of the past. Out with the old and with the bold." The crowd erupted in applause and laughter. Sarah was beaming. Rogers had his arm around her waist, looking every bit the conquering hero. Harold soaked in the attention like he'd just announced a major charitable donation instead of publicly humiliating his former son-in-law. I watched that video 17 times that night, sitting in my nearly empty house. Most of the furniture was gone, sold to pay down debt. Just me, my phone, and Harold's voice echoing in the darkness. Ghost of the past. That's what I was now. Not Frank. Not a veteran who'd served his country. Not a businessman who'd built something honest from nothing. Not a husband who'd loved his wife for 25 years. I was a ghost, an embarrassment to be cleared away so the important people could move forward with their important lives. The bank foreclosed 3 weeks later. Frank's foundation ceased to exist on a Tuesday morning in mid-November, the same day they auctioned off my remaining equipment. I stood in the parking lot and watched strangers load my tools onto trailers. Mike was there. He tried to talk to me, but I just walked away. Didn't trust myself to speak. Didn't trust what I might say or do. I moved into a small apartment on the east side, the kind of place where the heater sounds like it's harboring a dying animal, and the neighbors' arguments come through the walls in high definition. My lawyer told me the divorce would be finalized by January. Sarah was going for half of everything, which was hilarious since there was nothing left to split except debt. Harold had won. He'd systematically dismantled my business, my marriage, and my reputation. I was 52 years old with a failed company, a failed marriage, and a rapidly depleting bank account. I spent my days sending out resumes and my nights staring at the ceiling, doing math that never added up right. I'd built something real, something good, and they'd crushed it like it was nothing, like I was nothing. Some nights I'd drive past the old shop, just to torture myself, I guess. The sign was still up, Frank's Foundations. Someone had spray painted over it. Couldn't even read the name anymore. Just ghost letters under layers of paint. Ghost. That word kept rattling around in my head. Harold called me a ghost. Something to be cleared away. Something that used to exist but doesn't anymore. Something dead. Here's what I learned about hitting rock bottom. It's not the fall that breaks you. It's lying there in the crater, looking up at where you used to be, and realizing that everyone who pushed you is up there celebrating, toasting to your absence, building their happiness on top of your grave. December came. The divorce was almost final. My savings were gone. I was working at a hardware store for $13 an hour, helping contractors buy supplies for the kind of jobs I used to run. Some of them recognized me. Most pretended they didn't. That was somehow worse. The absolute worst part happened on a Tuesday afternoon. One of my old drywall guys came in. Tim, a kid I'd trained myself, taught him how to read blueprints and calculate materials. He didn't see me at first, just slapped a pile of expensive gear on the counter and pulled out a shiny Rogers Construction Company card. Then he looked up. The recognition hit his face like a slap. Then came the pity. He mumbled my name. I scanned his items, keeping my voice flat as concrete. Told him his total. He fumbled with the card. Couldn't meet my eyes. Said something about the weather. I handed him the receipt and watched him practically run out the door. I stood there feeling smaller than the loose change rattling in the register drawer. I kept that video of Harold's toast on my phone, deleted it a dozen times, re-downloaded it from the cloud a dozen more. Couldn't stop watching it. Couldn't stop hearing those words. Ghosts of the past. Christmas was coming. The Montgomerys were probably planning another elaborate party. Sarah and Rogers were probably shopping for matching sweaters. Mike was probably cashing bigger paychecks. And I was standing in the frozen foods aisle of a grocery store at 11 p.m., trying to decide if I could afford real coffee or if store brand would have to do. That's where my story stood. 52 years old, divorced, bankrupt, working retail, living in an apartment that smelled like mildew and broken dreams. Everything I'd built was gone. Everyone I'd trusted had betrayed me. And somewhere at a mansion in North Dallas, the people who destroyed my life were sleeping peacefully in beds that cost more than my car. I was a ghost, all right, the kind that haunts the clearance rack at Home Depot, helping rich men buy supplies to build their dreams while mine lay buried under foreclosure notices and divorce papers. They thought they'd gotten rid of me, clear me away like construction debris, like I was nothing but an obstacle they'd finally overcome. They had no idea what they created, because ghosts don't just disappear. Sometimes they come back, and when they do, they collect what they're owed. Time doesn't heal all wounds. Sometimes it just gives them space to fester. Nearly a year crawled by, 347 days, but who's counting? Me. I was counting every single one of them in that apartment that smelled like mildew and defeat. The kind of place where the shower groans like it's got arthritis, and the neighbor's TV comes through the walls so clear you know their viewing habits better than your own thoughts. The smell that used to mean success, that mix of fresh earth and diesel and morning coffee, was gone, replaced by instant ramen and cheap beer, and the particular stink of a life going nowhere. I'd wake up some mornings and forget where I was. Then I'd remember, and that was worse than any nightmare. I picked up whatever construction work I could find, day labor mostly, standing in parking lots at 5 a.m. with guys half my age, hoping some contractor needed an extra set of hands. The foreman would look at my gray hair and my resume, and their eyes would say what their mouths wouldn't. You're overqualified and too old, and we both know something went wrong in your life to put you here. They were right. The divorce finalized in February. Sarah got the house. I got the debt. Funny how that works. Her lawyer was better than mine, which is to say she could afford one, and I couldn't. The settlement was clinical. Sterile. 25 years of marriage reduced to a spreadsheet of assets and liabilities. Turns out I was mostly liabilities. I saw her once after the papers were signed. At a gas station, of all places. She was getting into a brand new Range Rover. Designer sunglasses. Hair perfect. She saw me standing by my beat-up Honda, and for a second our eyes met. I waited for something. Recognition, maybe. Regret. Anything human. She looked away and drove off. I stood there smelling gasoline and watched her taillights disappear, and I realized she'd already forgotten me. I was history. Ancient history. A mistake she corrected and moved on from. One Tuesday morning in September, I was grabbing coffee at a diner near the hardware store. One of those places with cracked vinyl booze and coffee that tastes like it was brewed during the previous presidential term. I was early for my shift, killing time. Try and make a single cup of coffee last as long as possible, because that's what your life becomes when you're counting pennies. There was a magazine rack by the register. You know the type. Celebrity gossip, fishing magazines, local society stuff that nobody actually reads. Except I read it, because there on the cover of Dallas Society magazine were Sarah and Rogers. Professional photo. Professionally happy. Both of them in hard hats at some construction site, looking like they'd never touched actual dirt in their lives. The headline read, "Couple of the Year, Building Dallas's Future." I bought the magazine. Spent $4 I didn't have. Read the whole article standing right there in the diner while my coffee got cold. They talked about their vision for Dallas, their commitment to quality, their innovative approach to construction management. Rogers threw around terms like sustainable practices and community investment, words that sound real good when you're not cutting corners to underbid everyone else. There was a quote from Sarah. She said something about finding a partner who shared her values and her ambitions, about building something meaningful together, about foundations, strong foundations, being essential to any lasting structure. I almost laughed. Would've, if it didn't hurt so much. They weren't just building the future. They built it with the bricks for my life, my workers, my clients, my wife. They demolished me and used the rubble for their empire. October came around again, a year since everything fell apart. Halloween was approaching, and I knew that meant the Montgomery's annual masquerade ball was coming up, another celebration for people who had everything to congratulate themselves on having even more. I was living in a different apartment by then. Cheaper, smaller. The building manager called it cozy. That's realtor speak for you can touch both walls while standing in the middle of the room. But it was mine, paid for by my hardware store paycheck and the occasional weekend work when I could find it. I was packing, not moving, just consolidating, selling off the last pieces of my old life to make rent. Had a buyer coming for my tool collection. Good tools, too. Snap-on, Milwaukee, the kind you build a career with, the kind that lasts longer than marriages, apparently. I was going through an old toolbox, one of the first ones I ever owned. Bought it used at a pawn shop when I was 23. Red metal, scratched to hell, more rust than paint, but it still latched solid. That's quality. Things used to be built to last. At the bottom, under some old wrenches and a tape measure that didn't retract right anymore, my fingers hit something that wasn't a tool. Cold metal, different weight. I pulled it out. A key, brass, old, heavy, corroded green in spots. For a second, I couldn't place it. Then it hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. 15 years ago, maybe 16, Sunday afternoon, I was at the Montgomery estate, because of course we spent every Sunday there. Sarah insisted. Family time, she called it. I called it weekly humiliation. But I kept that to myself because I loved her, and you do stupid things for people you love. The pipe burst in Harold's wine cellar. Not just any wine cellar. The man had a climate-controlled underground vault for his collection. Some bottles down there cost more than I made in a month. And one of the old pipes decided that Sunday was a great day to split and spray water everywhere. Harold found me reading the paper. Didn't ask. Commanded. Said I was good with my hands. Said like it was an insult and a compliment at the same time. Told me to handle it before the water damaged his collection. Wouldn't want to call a professional on a Sunday, would we? Not when we have our very own handyman in the family. I went down there. Water was already ankle deep. Old pipe, corroded fitting, easy fix if you had the right tools. I had the right tools. Always did. That was my curse, being useful. While I was down there, up to my knees in cold water, wrenching on pipes that were older than me, I saw it. A safe, not some modern electronic thing. Old school, the kind that looks like it could survive a nuclear blast. It was tucked in the corner, partially hidden behind wine racks. Harold came down to check on me, saw me looking at the safe, got this nervous little laugh, made a joke about hiding his skeletons down there, said something about how every man needs secrets, needs a place where he buries the things that could sink him, told me not to touch it unless I want to get pulled under too. We laughed. It was tense, awkward, the way you laugh at your boss's bad jokes because your mortgage depends on it. I finished the repair. Harold handed me a towel like I was the help, because I was the help. I wiped my hands on my coveralls, and that's when I felt the key. It had been sitting on a shelf near the safe. Heavy, cold. I palmed it without thinking, slipped it into my pocket. Didn't plan to keep it. Wasn't trying to steal anything. But something in me, some small wounded part that was tired of being treated like a servant in my own family, that part said keep it. One thing. One small heavy piece of metal from Harold's perfect house. Payment for being summoned like a handyman, instead of treated like a son-in-law. I forgot about it. Years passed. Got buried in that toolbox and buried in my memory. Until now, I sat on the floor of my tiny apartment, holding that key, and my brain started making connections like it was wiring a circuit board. Skeletons. Harold always joked about skeletons, about secrets. But it wasn't a joke, was it? The man lived in a mansion, drove cars that cost six figures, owned half the commercial real estate in North Dallas. But on paper, on tax returns, guy was practically modest, comfortable but not wealthy. I'd seen his public filings once years ago when Sarah and I were getting life insurance sorted out. The numbers didn't match. Never did. I'd noticed but never said anything, because you don't question your father-in-law's finances when you're trying to keep peace in your marriage. But I wasn't married anymore, and I wasn't trying to keep peace. Double books, offshore accounts, shell companies, money laundering, tax evasion, fraud. That's what was in that safe. Had to be. Harold wasn't hiding jewelry or sentimental photos. He was hiding a paper trail of every illegal dollar he'd ever made, every corner he'd cut, every law he'd broken building his empire. The man who destroyed my life had buried the evidence of his crimes in a basement vault, and I had the key. My hands started shaking, not from fear, from something else, something cold and clear and focused. For the first time in a year, I felt something other than despair. I felt purpose. I was staring at that key, mind racing through possibilities, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer. Bill collectors mostly. But something made me pick up. It was Mike. His voice cracked on my name. Sounded like he'd been crying or working up the courage to make this call for weeks. Probably both. He didn't make excuses. Didn't try to explain away the betrayal. Just said he couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't look at himself. Said Rogers was doing to other people what he'd done to me. Seeing it happen again, being part of it again, was eating him alive. He apologized. Said he knew it didn't mean anything. Said he knew he'd destroyed whatever relationship we had. But he had to try to make something right, even if nothing ever could be right again. Then he told me about this year's Halloween ball. It was going to be the biggest one yet. Montgomery and Rogers were celebrating. They just squeezed out their last major competitor in the North Dallas market. Complete domination. Total victory. Harold was planning to announce some kind of major expansion. Rogers would be there, obviously. Sarah, too. Everyone who mattered in Dallas construction and real estate. All in one place. All celebrating their success built on the backs of people like me. Mike had access to things. Floor plans. Security schedules. He'd been part of installing the new security system. Rogers' company did it. Cut rate, of course, because Rogers cut corners on everything, including his own safety. There was a blind spot, right near the wine cellar entrance. Rogers had skimped on one camera to save a few $100. The irony was almost beautiful. The man who'd stolen my business by undercutting me had underbid his own security. Mike sent me files, blueprints, guard rotation schedules, camera placements, everything I'd need if I wanted to get into that house unseen during the party. He didn't ask why I wanted it, didn't ask what I was planning, just said he owed me and this was the only payment he could offer. Then he hung up before I could respond. Maybe he didn't want to hear my voice. Maybe he was afraid of what I'd say. I sat there in my apartment with a rusty key in one hand and my phone in the other. Outside, some car alarm was going off. Someone was yelling in Spanish. Normal night, sounds in my neighborhood. But inside my head, it was quiet, focused, like standing on a job site before the first concrete pour, when everything is planned and prepped and all that's left is execution. My father taught me something when I was a kid. He was a carpenter, worked with his hands his whole life, died with those same hands covered in scars and calluses. He told me that the measure of a man isn't what he builds. It's what he does when someone tears it down. You can walk away, start over. Lots of men do. Probably the smart play, probably the safe play. Or you can rebuild, but not the same structure. Something different, something stronger, something your enemies won't see coming until it's too late. And the foundation they're standing on starts to crack. I looked at that key. 15 years it had been hiding in my toolbox. 15 years of waiting for this exact moment. Like the universe knew. Like it was saving this trump card for when I'd need it most. Harold called me a ghost. Said he'd clear me away. Treated me like I was already dead and buried and forgotten. But here's the thing about ghosts. They're not really dead. They're unfinished business. They're debts that never got paid. They're mistakes that come back when you least expect them. They're the things you threw away that somehow find their way back home. Harold Montgomery had no idea what he created when he destroyed my life. He thought he'd eliminated a problem, cleared away an obstacle, buried a ghost. He didn't bury me deep enough. I stood up, set the key on my small kitchen counter, looked at it sitting there in the fluorescent light, brass tarnished to green, still heavy, still solid, still the key to a door that Harold thought was locked forever. My phone buzzed. Mike had sent one more text. Just 3 words. "I'm sorry, boss." I didn't reply. Wasn't sure what to say. Maybe there was nothing to say. Some things you do can't be forgiven with words. They can only be balanced with actions. Halloween was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to plan. 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks before the ghosts of the past would come knocking on Harold Montgomery's door. Not to haunt, not to scare, to collect. I picked up the key again, felt its weight in my palm. Cold, heavy, patient. It had waited 15 years in darkness. It could wait 3 more weeks. Outside, the car alarm finally stopped. The yelling faded. The city went quiet, or as quiet as it ever gets. Somewhere in North Dallas, in a mansion I used to visit for Sunday dinners, Harold Montgomery was probably sipping expensive scotch, planning his party, counting his money, sleeping the peaceful sleep of men who think they've won. Let him sleep. Let him celebrate. Let him think the war is over. Because ghosts don't fight fair. They don't fight clean. They don't follow the rules that living men follow. They just come when you least expect them. And when they do, they take what's owed. I had a key. I had blueprints. I had a blind spot in the security system. And I had absolutely nothing left to lose. Harold Montgomery thought he knew what I was capable of, thought I was just some working man, some simple contractor who played by the rules and lost because the game was rigged. He was about to learn that the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one with the most to lose. It's the one with nothing left but time and patience and a very, very specific plan. The ghost was coming back. And this time, he wasn't asking permission. 3 weeks. That's how long I had to become someone I'd never been before. I'm not a thief. Never stole a thing in my life except maybe that rusty key. And even that felt more like payment than theft. But I had to learn. Had to study those blueprints Mike set me until I could walk through that mansion blindfolded. Had to memorize guard rotations and camera angles and the exact timing of everything. Turns out planning a heist isn't that different from planning a construction job. You measure twice. Cut once. You identify your load-bearing walls and your weak points. You calculate risk versus reward. You prepare for everything that can go wrong because something always goes wrong. I bought a small camera, the kind that fits in your palm. Nothing fancy, just something that could photograph documents clearly. Cost me $200 at an electronics store. The kid behind the counter asked if I was a private investigator. I told him I was doing genealogy research. He seemed disappointed. Guess the truth is never as interesting as what people imagine. Then I needed a way in. Mike's blueprint showed a blind spot, but I still needed a reason to be there. Couldn't just walk up to the gate and ask if they needed help serving champagne to the people who destroyed my life. I found a catering company online. Elegant Bites. One of those overpriced outfits that charge $50 for a single crab puff. They were handling the Montgomery party, posting about it on social media like it was the event of the century, looking for temporary staff for their biggest event of the year. I applied, used a fake name, paid cash for a burner phone for the contact number. They hired me without even checking references. Turns out when you're willing to work Halloween night for minimum wage plus tips, caterers aren't picky about your background. They sent me the uniform. Black pants, white shirt, black vest, bow tie. I stared at a hanging in my apartment and thought about how I used to wear suits to pitch million-dollar projects. Now I was putting on a penguin costume to serve drinks to the people who'd taken those projects from me. Funny how life works. Halloween fell on a Friday that year. Perfect for a party. Perfect for rich people to pretend to be other rich people in costumes that cost more than most folks' monthly rent. I showed up at the catering company's staging area at 4 p.m. About 20 other servers, mostly college kids trying to make extra cash. Nobody looked at me twice. Middle-aged guy in a catering uniform? Invisible. Might as well have been wearing an actual ghost costume. The supervisor, a stressed woman named Monica, who looked like she survived on coffee and anxiety, handed out assignments. I made sure to volunteer for beverage service. Keep moving. Keep your head down. Refill glasses and fade into the wallpaper. Perfect. We loaded into vans at 5:30. The Montgomery estate was lit up like a Hollywood premiere. String lights everywhere, enormous inflatable decorations, the kind of over-the-top display that screams we have more money than taste. Cars lined the circular driveway. Bentleys, Ferraris, Teslas, Range Rovers. Probably $20 million worth of vehicles just sitting there. The house itself looked like a cruise ship on fire. Every window blazing with light. You could hear the party from the street. Music, laughter, the sound of people who'd never worried about making rent having the time of their lives. I grabbed my tray and walked through the service entrance with the rest of the staff. Nobody checked IDs. Nobody questioned anything. We were the help. Might as well have been furniture. Inside was chaos. Organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. People everywhere in elaborate costumes and masks. I saw a woman dressed as Marie Antoinette talking to a guy in a full Iron Man suit that probably cost more than my car. Saw a group dressed as the Founding Fathers, which felt darkly ironic given what I knew about Harold's relationship with paying taxes. I kept my head down, moved through the crowd with my tray of champagne glasses. Someone grabbed a glass without looking at my face. Someone else made a joke to their friend about the service being slow. I was background noise. Invisible. Exactly what I needed to be. I spotted Sarah around 7 p.m. She was dressed as Cleopatra. Gold everywhere, elaborate headdress. The works. Rogers was Mark Antony. Naturally. They moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting congratulations and compliments. She looked happy. Really happy. The kind of happiness that comes from getting everything you wanted and never questioning whether you deserved it. Something twisted in my gut. Not jealousy exactly. More like recognition. I'd loved a version of this woman for 25 years. But that woman never existed. This was who she'd always been. I was just too busy building foundations to notice mine was resting on sand. Harold was holding court in the main ballroom, dressed as some kind of Renaissance nobleman. Velvet and gold, a costume that probably cost enough to feed a family for a month. He was laughing, telling stories, playing a benevolent patriarch. Everyone loved Harold Montgomery. Everyone wanted to be near him. None of them knew what was hidden in his basement. I checked my watch. 8:15. The fireworks were scheduled for 9 p.m. That was my window. When everyone was outside watching explosions in the sky, I'd be inside opening a different kind of bomb. The hardest part was waiting, standing there serving drinks, smiling politely when someone actually bothered to acknowledge my existence, watching the minutes crawl by. I'd run the timing 100 times in my head. Knew exactly how long it would take to get to the wine cellar, how long I'd need inside, how long to get back to my position before anyone noticed I was gone. 15 minutes. That's all I had. At 8:55, Monica announced that staff should position themselves near the exits to direct guests to the terrace for fireworks display. Perfect. Everyone moving. Everyone distracted. The kind of controlled chaos that makes security guards focus on the crowd instead of the corners. I drifted away from my assigned position, moved toward the east wing like I was heading to restock my tray. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even looked. The hallway to the wine cellar was empty, dark. I could hear the party behind me getting more distant with each step. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was it. No turning back after this. The door was exactly where Mike's blueprints said it would be. Old wood, brass handle, the kind of door that belongs in a house with history. I pulled out the key. My hand was shaking. Not from fear exactly. From adrenaline. From the weight of what I was about to do. I slid the key into the lock. It didn't turn. My stomach dropped. 15 years of rust and corrosion. The key fit, but something was stuck. I applied pressure. Gentle at first, then harder. Nothing. The metal resisted like it had fused solid over the years. Outside, I heard the first boom of fireworks. My window was opening, and I was stuck at a locked door with a key that didn't work. I closed my eyes, took a breath. My father's voice in my head. When something won't move, you're either pushing wrong or not pushing hard enough. I gripped the key tighter. Applied steady, firm pressure. Not forcing it, but not giving up either. The kind of pressure you use when you're trying to break something free without breaking it off. The lock groaned. Metal on metal. Years of rust screaming in protest. Then suddenly it gave. The key turned. The lock clicked open. I was inside. The stairs down were exactly as I remembered. Stone, worn smooth by a century of footsteps. Cool air rising from below. That particular smell of old wine and older money. Behind me, fireworks were going off like artillery. Booms and cracks echoing through the night. Nobody would hear a door close. Nobody would notice a ghost descending into darkness. The wine cellar was bigger than I remembered. Racks stretching into shadows. Bottles were thousands, tens of thousands. A collection that would make sommeliers weep. And in the corner, behind a rack of what was probably vintage Bordeaux, the safe. Still there, still massive, still holding secrets that could bury a rich man. I pulled out my camera, checked the battery. Full charge, tested the flash. Working, everything ready. Now I just needed to get into the safe. I didn't waste time trying birthdays or anniversaries. Harold wasn't sentimental. He was an egotist. What mattered to him? What would he choose as a combination to his most important secrets? Then it hit me. The story he used to tell at parties. His first big score. The deal that made him. He bought out his first partner's company for pennies on the dollar. Forced a guy into retirement with nothing but a handshake and a promise that Harold never kept. The date of that acquisition was Harold's origin story. His proof that he was smarter, tougher, meaner than everyone else. July 14th, 1987. I spun the dial. July 14th, 87. Click. The safe opened. Inside was exactly what I'd hoped for and more. File folders, hard drives, USB sticks, ledgers written in actual ink. Harold had kept everything. Every shady deal, every illegal transaction, every tax dodge and fraudulent transfer. The man documented his own crimes like he was proud of them. Maybe he was. Maybe when you get away with it for long enough, you start to think you're invincible. I started photographing. Page after page. Document after document. Wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. Shell company registrations in Delaware and Panama. Double book accounting that would make the IRS agents who saw it weep with joy. And then, buried near the bottom, emails. Email chains between Harold and Rogers. Discussing my company. Planning my downfall. Coordinating the bid theft. The employee poaching. Even timing it with Sarah's departure for maximum damage. It was all there. Every piece of the conspiracy. Every nail in their coffin. I photographed everything. My camera clicking away like a machine gun. And with each click, I felt something heavy lifting off my chest. They destroyed me deliberately, methodically, with planning and precision. This wasn't bad luck or business. This was murder. They'd killed Frank's foundations and danced on its grave. Now I had proof. I was almost finished when I heard voices at the top of the stairs. I froze, camera in one hand, file folder in the other. The voices got louder. Footsteps on stone. Coming down. I shoved everything back into the safe. Pushed it closed but didn't lock it. No time. Slid behind the wine rack. Pressing myself into the corner. trying to make myself small. The overhead light clicked on. Bright. Exposing. If they looked in my direction, I was done. Harold's voice. The 94 Margot, I think. It's perfect for the announcement. Rogers. You sure you want to break that one out? Thing's worth. What? $3,000 a bottle. Harold. Tonight's we're celebrating. We finally cornered the entire North Dallas market. Nobody left to compete with. They moved toward the wine racks. 20 feet from where I was hiding. 15. I could see them now through gaps in the bottles. Harold in his ridiculous costume. Rogers looking smug in whatever historical figure he was pretending to be. Rogers pulled a bottle, examined the label. You see that picture in Dallas Society last month? Frank working at a hardware store. Guy looked like he'd aged 20 years. Harold laughed. The sound made my blood turn to ice. I saw it. Real ghost, isn't he? Sarah dodged a bullet getting out when she did. Imagine being married to that kind of failure. Rogers. She definitely traded up. Though I gotta say, I almost feel bad. Guy never saw it coming. Harold. That's because he was always just a working man. Born to dig ditches, not run businesses. You can teach a dog tricks, but it's still just a dog. They stood there talking about me like I was already dead and buried, talking about their victory, their success, how smart they'd been to eliminate me before I became a real threat. They clinked bottles together like they were toasting my funeral. And I stood there in the shadows, holding evidence of every crime they committed, listening to them celebrate my destruction, and I thought, they're right. I am a digger. That's what I do. I dig, and I just dug deep enough to hit their graves. They grabbed their wine and headed back upstairs. The door closed. The light went out. I waited in darkness, counting to 100, making sure they were really gone. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I had what I needed, more than I needed. Every document photographed, every crime documented. Enough evidence to bury Harold Montgomery, and everyone connected to him so deep they'd need a mining operation to dig out. I climbed the stairs slowly, carefully. At the top, I cracked the door open. The hallway was empty. Fireworks were still going off outside. I could hear the crowd ohing and awing at each explosion. I slipped out, locked the door behind me, pocketed the key, walked back toward the main party, like I'd just been restocking my tray. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. I was invisible again. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I served drinks. I smiled politely. I watched Harold give his speech about the future of Montgomery development and the bright new chapter they were entering. Watched everyone applaud. Watched Sarah and Roger stand beside him like the perfect power family. And the whole time, I had their destruction sitting in my pocket in a camera no bigger than a deck of cards. At midnight, we packed up. Monica was happy with how everything went. Told us we'd all get a bonus for handling such a big event. I thanked her, took my uniform home, threw it in the trash. I sat in my apartment that night, transferring files from my camera to my laptop, then to 3 separate USB drives. Backed everything up to the cloud under 3 different email accounts. I wasn't taking any chances. This was my lottery ticket, my retirement fund, my justice. But it was more than that. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I hadn't failed because I was incompetent. Proof that the game had been rigged from the start. Looking at those documents, seeing it all spelled out in black and white, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost 2 years. I felt like myself again. The question was what to do next. I could leak it to the press. Let them tear Harold apart in the court of public opinion. But that felt messy, uncontrolled. Rich people have good lawyers and better PR firms. They'd spin it, bury it, make it disappear. I could go to the police. But tax fraud isn't really their jurisdiction. They just pass it up the chain to federal investigators who might take years to do anything. Then I remembered something. A program I'd read about years ago. The IRS whistleblower program. If you provide information that helps them collect unpaid taxes, you get a percentage of what they recover, 15 to 30%, depending on the case. I did the math in my head. Harold was hiding millions, maybe tens of millions. If the IRS recovered even a fraction of it, I didn't sleep that night. Just sat there staring at my laptop screen, looking at all those documents, thinking about how sometimes the best revenge isn't the loudest one. It's the most thorough. My father taught me that when you want to take down a big tree, you don't hack at the branches. You go for the roots. Cut the foundation out from under it, and gravity does the rest. Harold thought he'd buried me, clear me away like construction debris. He had no idea I'd been digging underneath him the whole time. Outside, the sun was starting to come up. Halloween was over. The masks were off. Time to show everyone who the real ghost was. Monday morning, I walked into the office of the best tax attorney in Texas. His name was Marcus Webb, former IRS prosecutor turned private practice. The kind of lawyer who knows every loophole because he used to close them for a living. His hourly rate was more than I used to make in a week, but I wasn't paying hourly. I was offering him the case of his career. I laid it all out. The documents, the photographs, the evidence of systematic tax evasion spanning 3 decades. Shell companies, offshore accounts, fraudulent deductions, unreported income. Harold Montgomery had built an empire on unpaid taxes. Marcus went quiet, flipped through page after page on my laptop. His expression never changed, but his eyes got sharper with each document. Finally, he looked up at me. He asked why I was bringing this to him instead of just sending it anonymously to the IRS. I told him the truth. I wanted to do this right. Legal, protected, and I wanted my cut. He smiled for the first time. Said most people come to him trying to hide money from the government. I was the first person in years who'd come try and give them money they didn't know they were owed. We filed the whistleblower claim that afternoon. Official, documented, protected under federal law. Once you file, you're untouchable. The government has every incentive to keep you alive and cooperative because you're their key witness. Marcus told me it would take time. Months, maybe a year. The IRS moves slow, but they move thorough. He said to go live my life and let the machine do its work. So I did. Went back to my hardware store job. Kept my head down. Waited. 3 months passed. Nothing happened. For months. Still nothing. I started wondering if I'd miscalculated. If maybe Harold's lawyers were better than his crimes. If justice was just another fairy tale we tell ourselves to sleep at night. Then one morning in March, it happened. Federal agents hit the Montgomery estate at 6 a.m. Simultaneous raids on Rogers Construction, Harold's main office, 3 of his shell company addresses. They came with warrants and forensic accountants. Seized computers, froze bank accounts, arrested Harold before he'd even had his morning coffee. The news broke by noon. Every channel, every website. Biggest tax fraud case in Dallas history. Montgomery development was finished. I was at work when I heard. Someone had the news on in the break room. I watched Harold being let out of his house in handcuffs. His face that particular shade of gray that people get when their world is ending. Watched Rogers getting the same treatment at his office. Watched news helicopters circle like vultures over the carcass of an empire. Nobody at work knew I had anything to do with it. I was just another guy watching rich people finally face consequences. We all agreed it was about time. Then I went back to stocking shelves. That night, Sarah called. First time I'd heard her voice in over a year. She was crying, asking if I knew anything, if I'd done this, if I was happy now that her life was destroyed. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. Told her I was sorry she was going through a hard time. Told her I hoped she landed on her feet. Then I hung up and slept better than I had in 2 years. The case moved fast once it started. Harold's lawyers tried everything. Claimed the documents were forged. Claimed illegal search and seizure. Claimed their client was being persecuted. None of it worked. The evidence was overwhelming and ironclad. Rogers flipped first. Cut a deal to testify against Harold in exchange for reduced charges. Even gave up details about how they coordinated my company's destruction. Said it was all Harold's idea, that he was just following orders. Classic. The prosecutors didn't even need his testimony. The documents spoke for themselves. $43 million in unpaid taxes over 30 years. Penalties and interest pushed it over 60 million. Montgomery Development declared bankruptcy. The estate went up for auction. The cars, the art, the wine collection, everything. Harold got 15 years. Rogers got 8, both in federal prison. The kind where white-collar criminals learn that money can't buy everything. The IRS finished calculating everything in September. Took them a year to chase down every hidden account and offshore shell company. They recovered $42 million. Paid back taxes, penalties, seized assets, the whole 9 yards. In October, exactly 2 years after the Halloween party where I'd been declared a ghost, I got a letter from the IRS. Official, legal, thanking me for my cooperation in bringing tax cheats to justice. Attached was a check, $7,200,000. My cut, 18% of the recovered amount, legally earned, federally protected, every penny of it mine. I sat in my apartment staring at that check for an hour. It wasn't revenge money. It wasn't luck or charity or an inheritance I didn't earn. It was payment for work done, for digging through documents, for taking a risk, for bringing criminals to justice. The hardest money I ever made, and the fairest. First thing I did was pay off every debt I had, every credit card, every loan, every dollar I owed to anyone. Being debt-free felt better than being rich. Second thing I did was buy back my company name. Frank's Foundations was dead, but its corpse was still warm. The bankruptcy trustee was happy to sell me the naming rights for almost nothing. Nobody else wanted them. Third thing I did was go to the Rogers Construction bankruptcy auction. It was beautiful, poetic even. All of Rogers' equipment, his office furniture, his contracts, everything he'd stolen from me, sitting there waiting for the highest bidder. There weren't many bidders. Word gets around when a company goes down for fraud. Nobody wants to touch anything associated with that stink. I bought it all. His excavators, his office, his client list, pennies on the dollar. The whole lot for less than $200,000. The trustee seemed relieved someone was willing to take it. I renamed everything, scrubbed off Rogers' branding, brought it all under the Frank's Foundation's banner. Bigger than before, stronger than before, built on actual money this time, not debt and dreams. Then I started calling my old crew, the guys who'd stayed loyal, the guys who'd left because they had families to feed and couldn't go down with a sinking ship. Told them I was back, told them I was hiring, told them we were going to build something real. Mike was the hardest call. Part of me wanted to leave him behind, let him live with his guilt. But my father taught me that a man's worth isn't measured by his mistakes. It's measured by what he does after. Mike cried when I offered him his job back, said he didn't deserve it. I told him he was right. He didn't, but I was giving it to him anyway because second chances are rare and we don't waste them. He's been my right hand again for 6 months now. Works harder than anyone. Shows up early, leaves late. Trying to earn back what he lost. Maybe he will someday. Maybe he won't. But he's trying, and that counts for something. The new Frank's Foundations is different from the old one. We're bigger. We have better equipment. We pay better wages. We turn down jobs from clients we don't trust. We build things that last because we put our name on them, and our name means something. Word got around. The guy who took down Harold Montgomery is back in business. Some people are afraid of me now. Think I'm vindictive. Dangerous. Good. Let them think that. I'm not the same person who got pushed around and destroyed. I'm someone who learned that sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something better. We're working on 3 major projects right now. Commercial buildings. The kind of work I used to dream about. The kind that keeps 50 people employed and feeds 50 families. Honest work. Real work. The kind that makes you tired at the end of the day, but proud when you drive past it. I saw Sarah one more time. She was working as a realtor. The kind who sells starter homes to young couples with big dreams and small budgets. Fell pretty far from Cleopatra at the Halloween ball. She was showing a house 3 blocks from one of my job sites. I was grabbing lunch from a food truck when I saw her. She looked older, harder. The kind of wear that comes from discovering that the life you thought you deserved was built on someone else's crimes. Our eyes met. She looked away first, climbed into a sensible sedan, not a Range Rover, drove off to her next showing. I didn't feel anything. No anger, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just nothing. She was a stranger who used to sleep in my bed. A chapter in a book I'd already finished. This morning I was on site for a new project. We're building the foundation for a medical complex. 5 buildings, 2 years of work, $8 million contract. My name on the proposal. My crew doing the work. My reputation making it possible. I got there at sunrise. That's still my favorite time. The site is quiet. The equipment is cold. And you've got the whole day ahead of you to build something that wasn't there before. The air smelled like fresh earth and diesel fuel and coffee from my thermos. Same smell as 27 years ago when I first started. Except now it smells like success again. One of my new guys, a kid fresh out of trade school, asked me why I still show up this early. Said, I'm the boss. I don't have to be here for the first pour. I could sleep in, let the foreman handle it. I told him what my father told me. The foundation is the most important part of any structure. It's hidden. Nobody sees it. But everything else depends on it. If you cut corners on the foundation, the whole building is compromised. Doesn't matter how pretty you make the exterior, it's still built on lies. He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he'll remember it 20 years from now when he's running his own crew. I think about Harold sometimes. Sitting in federal prison in his orange jumpsuit, no longer the king of North Dallas real estate. Just inmate number something or other, eating mystery meat in a cafeteria and sleeping in a cell the size of a closet. Wonder if he ever thinks about me. Wonder if he realizes the ghost he tried to bury came back and dragged him down instead. Probably not. Guys like Harold never think they did anything wrong. They just think they got unlucky, got caught, got betrayed by lesser men. They never understand that the foundation they built their empire on was rotten from the start. The thing about foundations is they're invisible until they fail. You can cover them up, hide them, pretend they don't matter. But eventually, gravity does its work. Everything built on lies comes down. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But eventually, always. I'm 54 now. Got gray in my beard and lines around my eyes that weren't there 2 years ago. Got $7 million in the bank and a company worth twice that. Got a crew that trusts me and clients who respect me and a reputation for building things that last. But more than that, I got something money can't buy. I got proof that I wasn't wrong. That I wasn't a failure. They said I was. That the game was rigged, and I still found a way to win. Real foundations aren't made of concrete. They're made of integrity, of keeping your word, of doing right even when it costs you, of getting knocked down and getting back up and finishing the job. Harold was right about one thing. I am a ghost, but not the kind he meant. I'm the ghost of a man they tried to bury. The memory of a mistake they made. The bill they forgot to pay. The debt that came due when they least expected it. They wanted to clear me away, make me disappear, pretend I never existed. But ghosts don't disappear. They haunt. They linger. They wait in the darkness for the right moment to remind you of what you did. And when that moment comes, when the ghost finally shows itself, it doesn't come to scare you. It comes to collect. This morning, standing on my job site, watching the sun come up over steel and concrete, I realized something. I'm not angry anymore. Not bitter. Not haunted by what they took from me. Because they didn't take anything. Not really. They destroyed a business. They ended a marriage. They took my money and my pride and tried to take my future. But they couldn't take what mattered. They couldn't take my skills, my knowledge, my willingness to work, my ability to build something from nothing. Those things were always mine, are still mine, will always be mine. You can take everything from a man except what he carries inside. And what I carry inside is the knowledge that real wealth isn't counted in dollars. It's counted in foundations that hold, in buildings that last, in handshakes that mean something, in a name that stands for quality. Frank's Foundations, rebuilt, stronger, better, not in spite of being destroyed, but because of it. The kid asked me one more question this morning. Asked if it was worth it. The bankruptcy, the loss, the year of struggle. If I'd do it all over again, knowing what I know now. I thought about it. Honest thought, not some quick answer. Thought about the pain and the humiliation, and the nights I wondered if I'd ever be anything other than broken. Then I looked at the job site, at the equipment with my company name on it, at the crew starting their day, at the foundation we were about to pour, solid and true and built to last. I told him yes. Every bit of it was worth it, because the man I was before couldn't have built this. That man was too trusting, too naive, too willing to believe that fairness and hard work were enough. The man I am now knows better, knows that sometimes the world is unfair, that sometimes people you trust will betray you, that sometimes you have to fight dirty to survive. But he also knows that survival isn't enough. You have to rebuild, have to prove that you're more than your worst moment, have to show the world that knocking you down just made you learn how to stand up stronger. They call me a ghost, tried to erase me, bury me, make me disappear. They were right about one thing. I am a ghost, but I'm the kind of ghost that builds, that creates, that rises from the rubble of what you destroyed and constructs something better from the ashes. I'm the ghost of every man who ever got knocked down and got back up, the ghost of fair play in an unfair world, the ghost of justice when mercy runs out. I'm Frank. I build foundations. And this time, I built one that nothing can shake. The ghost came back, and he built an empire on the graves of the men who tried to bury him.